Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
It is still morning for me, and it's still morning for you, but it's not morning for everybody. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, happy time zone,
Happy
everyone.
time zone.
I'm really excited today because we've been talking about identity governance for the last 3 weeks,
We
and we've
have.
done a lot of things, right?
We
You want to
have.
give us a summary, Shannon?
We'll start with the blog.
Yes.
This was authored by Subone, and it's got kind of a cheat sheet of all of our activities. We need to update some of the additional activities because we found out about some cool things like what we're going to go through today with you, a mixture of podcast live streams, blog posts, and then just getting content out there for the masses. So that's kind of a cool reality. So go there, take a look at the blog. The really neat thing, though, is if you've got time, spend some time and go through this Learn module. And inside the blog post, there will be a link for a questionnaire. Fill out the questionnaire once you've done the Learn path, and you'll be eligible for a discounted exam voucher. Free learning, discounted exam voucher, and you'll get a Credly badge, which is really cool. So you get like an identity contributor badge, I believe is what it is.
We're super excited about today because after 3 weeks of talking about identity governance, today we got some of our awesome PMs to show us how to do it in action. And not just that, not just showing identity governance and access reviews and what have you, but also using one of my favorite services on Azure, Logic Apps. I just want to bring Jeff and Curren to talk to us about what they do and why they do it. And morning, friends. How are you?
Good morning or good time zone. I'm going to use that
Happy
phrase
time
from now
zone.
on. I really like
Happy
that. Happy
time
time
zone.
zone.
Happy
There you
time
go.
zone, everyone.
I like it. Happy time zone.
So, Curren, do you want to go first?
Yeah, hi. So I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I work on identity governance that we've been talking about on the show for a few weeks. And specifically, I'm working on entitlement management in there and some of our new feature enhancements to that. So one of them being this extensibility with Logic Apps that we're going to demo today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Kazimer. I am a product manager in our customer experience team, and I focus on helping customers understand all the features they have in Azure Active Directory. But a passion of mine is also identity governance. So I'm actually really excited to show some of the work that Curren and team have been doing on bringing extensions to entitlement management.
We're excited to see the demo.
Yes.
And maybe we've probably got some questions along the way. So let's go ahead and we'll show your desktop here, Jeff. So you want to kind of walk us through the scenario?
And before you do that, if you don't know about identity governance, we got 4 or 5 videos out there. We also have Palm. Make sure to subscribe because there's a ton of information there to get you started. And then you can come back and see it in action with Jeff if that's your first time seeing identity governance. If not, Jeff is going to show you some stuff. Go for it.
If this is your first time looking at the entitlement management feature, I'll kind of call out some basic concepts. Now, Curren may have some additional context as he's really focused on the what we call EM product line. But today we're going to start looking at the Azure AD portal. So this is the center point of managing all of identity in an organization. It's you can see all the capabilities we have here and some basic information about our tenant. This is one of my lab tenants. But in this case, I actually want to go to the identity governance blade. In the identity governance blade, I'm actually going to, you have a full description of the capabilities that you want to use. So common use cases for group management, extra user lifecycle, protecting resource roles. But we can do all these capabilities with IGA, but today it's about entitlement management. When we say entitlement management, I think the previous videos that I saw earlier this week in this forum explained really kind of the use cases. In this scenario, we have some resources. Resources could be applications, SharePoint sites, Teams, Office 365 groups. We want to be able to enable users to self-service request access to them, have approvals to say, is the access appropriate? And then also have lifecycle. So is the access permanent? And does it expire at a certain time? And during that life cycle, do we actually review that access? So we don't have lingering access. So all the capabilities of getting the right access to the right user at the right time will be kind of demonstrated in using entitlement management. To begin, we're going to start with this concept called a catalog. And a catalog is essentially a collection of access packages, which I'll cover in a second, but it's very important to understand why you may want to use a catalog. A catalog is a way to sort of segment or delegate permissions of who can manage and assign resources in that catalog. In my scenario, I have a new project, Project Spark, that is happening in my organization. And I want to enable the user in my organization to request access and get timely access, and then do some extra special things. We're going to create a catalog to store that access package. We're calling it Project Spark. We're going to make it enabled. And right now, we're going to make it enabled for external users. It's important that entitlement management is for your internal users, your external users you have in your environment, and to onboard external users. So I think we've covered some of the lifecycle capabilities across the IGA platform, but I just wanted to call that out here. We have the catalog created. So now I want to add resources that we're going to give access to from this catalog. Today, the resources that I'd like to add is a Microsoft Teams. So Teams is a very modern collaboration platform. We see customers utilizing it for all sorts of projects. So in this case, we're going to center on the team called Project Spark. And because, as you'll find out as we go through, this is actually a sales and marketing project. So when we are trying to give access not only to our collaboration tools, we also want to manage access to maybe our sales tools. I have a Salesforce already set up for SSO and provisioning in my tenant. So we're going to include those in our access package. Now, these resources are available to create an access package from. But now let's talk about the custom extensions. So Curren, if you want to give some overview of what custom extensions are at this point.
Kind of what Jeff's showing here is kind of the setup of how we use entitlement management, how we link resources and roles and licenses into the access packages. And these sort of things have a workflow to them, right? So you might have an end user request this access package to kind of get those resources, or you might grant an end user an access package with these resources, or eventually that kind of grouping of resources might expire out. And with our kind of extensibility feature to Logic Apps, what we're doing is opening up a whole second set of workflows that you can write and call upon, linking to the kind of access package flow. For Logic Apps, right, you can link to, I think, about 100 different third-party and native Microsoft softwares, and with a very low-code solution, you can write a bunch of workflows in those third-party applications. And by integrating these things, we're saying that when you assign an access package or request an access package, you can at the same time kick off whatever other workflow you wrote in Logic Apps. So it really expands kind of the entire feature space of things you can do by giving you all the access package things, then all the Logic App things, and letting you kind of do them at the same time.
When the team was working on these capabilities of giving the ability to configure, not have to code custom extensions and workflows, I was really excited. I come from a background of deploying identity management solutions, and in a previous role, I deployed many identity management solutions using the Microsoft Identity Manager platform. So some people in the audience might be familiar with this. And one of the use cases was custom workflows for business processes. So we had this concept of workflows and workflow activity libraries. So many customers deployed, and by configuring these workflows for on-premises access. But now, as we modernized and moved to manage from cloud, I was really excited to bring those same capabilities of doing custom workflows, connecting the third-party systems right into the portal itself through configuration. We're going to walk through creating of what that custom extension is, and we're actually going to walk through the step-by-step in Logic App to do maybe what can be considered a common business process. Let's talk about the custom extension. So we're going to call this Project Spark Onboarding. This is where we're starting to talk about Logic Apps. So I'm going to have this wizard create me a new Logic App in one of my Azure AD subscriptions. You have the option of creating a dedicated Azure AD application, or you can select the existing application using a common application in my tenant just for demo purposes, but it really depends on your application management, how you want to approach this. The Logic App, I have to give it the application I'm associating with, the subscription that I'm using, the resource group. I typically recommend having a dedicated resource group to contain your workflows. This allows you to sort of secure, delegate, administrate the life cycle of who can manage those workflows. This is a pattern that I'm seeing customers use. So I'm going to give this a name. Now, there are some limitations on how we can name a Logic App, so we're going to use nomenclature here. So onboard Project Spark. Now we're going to create that Logic App. So what's happening is the template is going out and it's kind of verifying all of the components I need to deploy a Logic App in my resource environment. And it looks like we're good. So we're going to review, looks good to me, and we're going to create that. So we see that we now have the custom extension is here. It is the Logic App, and I can edit it or I can delete it. But actually, let's get into what we're actually going to configure. So this is let me close this in a second, I will. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a logic app, and then we're going to walk through after we run the logic app, and I'm going to explain some of the components that you have here for managing logic apps. But right now, we're going to go to the Logic App Designer. In the Logic App Designer, it's a visual sort of what you see is what you get sort of representation of a workflow. This means I don't have to write code. I can actually utilize these components to build really complex processes. The beginning of this is that we describe something called the trigger. And this means that when a HTTP post is done at this endpoint, we want to start this workflow. And we can see that our template has created a schema of all the parameters that may be passed in that trigger. And these will be things that we can use along the way on our journey of creating this logic app here. The default condition says, if the catalog ID matches the catalog that I associated a custom extension for. This allows you to either limit which the packages can create or call this workflow, or you can expand this to collections of object IDs that represent catalog. It really depends on how reusable you want this workflow to be. We can see that it's going to check that it is a valid catalog ID, and there's a test functionality here as if we're testing the scenario. But in this case, when we're not testing it, we're going to do some logic, right? In my scenario, I want to have an end user be able to request access and have it reviewed and approved. And if approved, I want them to be able to do certain things that are not typically what you may think of as assigning access, but they're things that the business needs to do. Like in this case, a user has to do training. So how do we notify them of the training they have to do? And what if we want to do an action that's not in the digital world? What if we want to maybe mail them something, a physical device? We can actually issue that ServiceNow help desk ticket to trigger that action as in the real world space. And then finally, as organizations are really modernizing to new collaboration tools, email may not be their preferred choice. It's not my preferred choice. I am a Teams user all day versus email. We're actually going to notify them in Teams. In here, we have a whole collection of activities, and Curren talked about it, right? There's a wealth of connectors.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I think the really cool thing is that we've already built in connectors to third-party services. So we have a lot of customers who are doing like deep integrations into ServiceNow, into Salesforce, things like that Logic Apps can already handle, right? It's already pre-connected, so you just pass kind of the information from access packages, from identity governance, from Azure into those third-party resources, which makes it super easy.
Let's go into creating a task. So in this scenario, I'm going to be adding the user to a team. And when they join the team, I want them to be able to get notified they have some training due. Prior to doing this demo, I have connected one of my accounts to the Planner service. So Planner service is part of the MS Graph API. And because I'm using this as a connector account, I didn't want to enter credentials on stream. So that's why I did this here. That I want to go create a task in the planner for this team. So in this case, we're going to say complete project. Because we're using sort of this dynamic process, I can add additional parameters when things are due, what color, and who it's assigned to. Select from these scenarios. So we're actually going to add it to the training bucket, and we'll see this in Teams when we come back later. Now, because I mentioned that there was dynamic parameters coming from that request, I can see those here. So I don't have to go and figure out what my variables are. The connector already is making them available for me. So in this case, nice. I'm going to say this task is assigned to the target email. We're going to say from now, we're going to add 30 days, 2 days. So from today, when this is assigned, I have a due date of 30 days. And I'm going to make it green. I'm not really sure if that really matters here, but we're taking these parameters and we're going to create a task. And then that's task one or step one. So let's go to action 2. We're going to create a service ticket, right? So we're going to say, let's use ServiceNow because ServiceNow, it's the platform. ServiceNow is integrated to Azure AD, so I can call it, I can utilize it, right? I can build this logic on there. It's not some disparate sort of system that I want to manage. So in this case, I'm not a ServiceNow, but I think I want a ticket, and we're going to add some custom information. So let's do description. If somebody is well-versed in ServiceNow, you may have additional values here. So in this case, we actually want to deliver onboarding kit to. Now, again, I'm going to use that dynamic content. I'm going to the display in here, send onboarding kit to the address of, and again, we're using that same, right? So this will create a service ticket. And now let's inform the user that all this is happening. So again, I mentioned I'm going to use Teams. Down here, because I have these sort of actions to pick from, let's do post a message in a channel or chat. Because Teams is connected to my environment, I'm going to use the Flowbot. So those who are familiar with Teams connectivity, there's a sort of an identity that we can use here. So I'm going to open a chat with from the Flowbot. And again, using that same dynamic, I don't have to go into here and pick. I always do that. I type ahead and then, so in here, we had the conditioned and I create a record and then I was posting to there. So what I'm doing is I'm sending the message of, what the scenario is here. And then because I'm using those variables, right, I can take the target display name and the output of the other action. So when I created the ServiceNow ticket, I called ServiceNow, got a response, and take that ticket number, and I'm going to use that to notify the end user. That is the end of my configuration. That was the last step. So we now have this here. So now let's go back into Entitlement Management. In here, I'm going to switch to a different catalog only because I associated it earlier. I'm going to create an access package that is going to call these workflows. So in this scenario, let's call this new package, project Spark onboarding. Onboard to project Spark. This is where I pick the resource role. So when this package is assigned, what access is actually granted? We're going to look here and I'm going to find project Spark and I'm going to add it. Now, what's key is we're adding the team, but I can pick role. So I can get really discrete here on what am I assigning. Am I going to be granting the owner of Project Spark team or the member? In this case, we're going to do membership. And now we're going to add an application because Salesforce is that second app that I want to give access to. What is the role that maybe I want to give? Maybe standard user. Maybe they're a marketing user. Marketing sounds good for a Project Spark. When this package is assigned, we don't know who can actually request this. Because of the policies we have here, I'm going to say all members of my tenant can request access. I can exclude guests. Most organizations have external guests now, so you may want to have those sort of policies to say members can request or be assigned this, or guests can get these. So you can do internal users and your external users.
I like the granularity of selecting that right out of the box.
Exactly. And you could have multiple policies for the same package. So it gives you flexibility, different approvers, different actions, different customs. So there's a lot of flexibility here. We're going to require approval, and I could require a manager, but in this demo, we're actually going to require this user just to make it simple. And I have a lot of flexibility of how long do I decide? Do I need additional approvers? There's a lot of customizations that we can do in this policy. But right now, we're going to enable this for new requests. If I'm asking a requester to make a request, maybe I want to get additional information. So what business area are you working in? And the purpose of this is to give the approver more information to make the decision. It's not just Jeff is making a request. Maybe I want to understand a little bit more of why Jeff is making this request. So we're going to say this is a required attribute. And then we come to the lifecycle. Lifecycle says that when this assignment is granted, how long is it good for? So I can do it on a specific date. Maybe when the project ends, access is automatically removed. Maybe it's a number of hours, or maybe it's permanent. In this case, I'm going to give it for a year. Over that year, things change, right? So you requested it, but maybe your role changed. We want to reattest or do a review of that access. So maybe every quarter, I want self-review. I want that person who has access to say, oh, do you still need this? Yes or no? And if they say no, I can remove them. So I'm cleaning up that access by policy, not having to rely on a manual action in that case to trigger the process.
Two questions for you, Jeff. Can I provide a custom review frequency, maybe every 15 days, or is it set to these predefined values?
So these are predefined here in the portal. So you can see it's important that we pick the expanse or the time span and the duration, because we want to be sure that we don't have it longer than the next one. Otherwise, you sort of get overlap. So we build these sort of things here. I think we might be able to do custom dates in the ATI. In the portal, no, we do not have customs there. I have to check on that.
The second question is, inside the Logic app, can I approve an approval step programmatically based on some certain criteria?
We're going to go into the steps. We can apply Logic Apps next, or maybe on the next thing. So I'll talk about where those steps are. In here, we have a self-review. I can have a specific reviewer. Maybe it's the project owner, right? It really depends on who has the responsibility for reviewing access, or it could be the manager. And then we have some even more granular settings around what can happen when there's no response. Maybe somebody, I've added an external user, they've left their organization, they're no longer responding. So we should say they're gone. Let's remove their account. So this is how we can tie these sort of IGA actions to those business flows that are happening in organizations today. All right, so now we come on to rules.
What we were talking about a little bit before is like, we've kind of explained like how we get the resources and things in access packages and everything that we can do super powerful with Logic Apps in kind of a very low code graphical solution. But then the question with these stages is, how do we put them together? So how do we go from like access package land to kicking off all these other hundreds of workflows that we want to do completely simultaneously? And that's where these stages come in. So we have 6 different places within the entitlement management workflow where we can kick off a logic app. And for each of these stages, you can actually link a separate logic app. So you could have as many as 6. These kind of 6 stages are kind of like the arc or the timeline or the circle of like the entitlement management kind of life cycle. So someone creates a request, you might want to do something like, oh, user creates a request for an access package. I'd like to go send a custom email or write something in Planner or make some change in Salesforce or reassign a ticket in Zendesk, do something. The next thing is request is approved, assignment is granted, of that access package, and then the final ones are kind of in the expiration at the end of that life cycle. So for each of these, we can, if you click on one, it'll populate kind of the custom extension that you've linked to the catalog. And when that stage occurs, that not only will that action happen in entitlement management, that request approval action, but also the custom extension you've kicked off. Right now they're simultaneous. We're working on a way where you can actually have the entitlement management process wait for the custom extension kind of logic app to finish before coming back to entitlement management. So we're giving you more kind of granularity there. But yeah, you can link kind of one-to-one. And one last thing, like Jeff was talking about catalogs in the beginning. So the catalog holds all the logic apps, the custom extensions that are available for any of these access packages in the catalog. So that's where that dropdown comes from.
And you can envision some business processes that can happen here, right? So when requests were created, maybe I want to go notify them in a third-party Slack or whatever tool the organization may be using. When it's approved, maybe I want to go and do additional tasks. First, granted is different. But expiration, these are things that we want to make sure that somebody is fully aware of access that's expiring, and they may want to extend that. Now, maybe I want to give an email in 14 days, but then at the first day, I want to do an instant message, right? Because now there's more of a criticality to the response before it's moved. And then maybe there's once the assignment is removed, I have some cleanup activity. Maybe I want to open a service ticket to go reclaim some hardware. You have a lot of flexibility, but we're always looking for other stages that you think you'd like to apply workflows. I think we've seen the request to, can we extend in the request to approval process? So any feedback you have on that is definitely appreciated. We've completed the access package. We've specified what we're assigning, how long the life cycle, who can get access and who can approve it. And then we've specified some custom questions. And then finally, the custom actions we're going to take when access is granted. And that's it. We've just brought governance to this organization. Like it took me longer to explain it than it actually is to do it in this process. But let's look at how we actually use this, right? We have a My Access portal link here, and I could share that to the end user. But in this case, we can actually go to the My Access portal directly. In My Access, I can see all of the available packages. Now, this comes back to that scoping we did, right? We scoped it to say all members can be request access in here. Now, if you remember the project name, I have many packages you can see, but I called it Project Spark Onboarding Demo. So I'm going to request access to this. And this is the question that I defined, right? So now I can say, well, I work in social media marketing, Spark kickoff. Now I could specify how long I need. Maybe even if it's for a year, maybe I only need it for 2 weeks. Maybe I don't want to have more access than I need. It could be a liability to have access I no longer want, right? So I can say, I only want it for a little bit of time, not all the time I'm allowed to by policy. All right, so I have an access request here, and I can look at my request history, and it's sitting here pending approval. Well, because I made the admin the approver, we can quickly switch over to the My Access portal as the admin. So you'll see that I have a pending request, and it's from demo. That's the user I'm using. And I can look at the details here, right? So when is it due? What are the request details? Okay, so demo is asking for it. When was it submitted? Oh, justification. And I see they're working in social media marketing, right? So yeah, I should approve this. So let's approve this. Approved and welcome. What is happening? So behind the scenes, entitlement management is going through its own process and looking to see, has this been approved? And then we go through a delivering phase, right? So I could see the request that was made. It was delivered. So it goes from pending approval, approved, delivering, and then finally delivered. And I can see that the assignment is here. This user has been delivered. They have now been given access to the team and can access Salesforce. If I go back to my user here, back to the My Apps portal, shortly we should see a Salesforce pop in here. So it does take a minute or two, so we'll come back to that. But let's look and see what Teams is doing. We can see that in the assignment, we have defined, and I'm going to look at the project one catalog. So let's go here, and I'm actually going to look and see what the instance of that Logic app was. So I can see that it did fire, it is successful, but I want to know a little bit more about what actually happened. So I can actually drill down into this instance. I can see it took 6.52 seconds. Remember that definition I talked about, the schema of the input?
Yeah.
Well, now I can see the values called, right? So when that post came in, these are all the values: the project Spark demo, project, the assignment, request date, the user.
Look
And I
at
can
that.
step through each one of these. Now, if I did have an error, and I can pull one up with an error, you would see that there's a red checkbox here, and I would see the error. So this helps me visually debug where Logic may have had a challenge.
Yeah.
We created a task. We could see that the plan ID, that all looks good. The due date, notice the due date is 30 days in the future because I calculated that from the
Yeah,
middle
that's
time.
right.
And you can see the outputs here. And then there's that service record. I went and created the service ticket, and I see the outputs. There's a ticket number. I called ServiceNow. I got a ticket number. And then I later called the Flowbot for, there's a lot of values in ServiceNow, I see. And then I posted it, and this was the message that was sent to the end user. So you can see it did submit the ticket number, it did have the name, and it did target this user. So let's see if my Teams, and my Teams has opened up. So I don't, but you can see that I now have a Project Spark team. But I do have some activities here because, again, I just joined. Here's that Power Bot, right? That Flowbot. Welcome to the project demo. Yes, you're getting a service request. Your onboarding ticket is being mailed to you. I'm enacting a physical action in the real world, not the digital world. But I'm able to take that process and give feedback to the end user, your ticket. So if you have a problem, you can go and actually call the help desk. Wouldn't that be great if you can do a self-service sign up of this? Well, you can. Today, if I was an external user accessing the My Access portal, I can have a policy allowing end users to come in and request access. So I can scope it to say Shannon's organization, and only Shannon will see that. Or I want to enable it for anybody to come in there and request access via Gmail account, Hotmail account, whatever identity you want to bring. And if approved, right, we can call the B2B invitation API, get them added to the tenant, and do those custom actions.
We
I
came
can
to the
take
bottom
this
of it.
question here about the fire and forget, because that's something that I was trying to mention earlier. So right now, it is fire and forget in the sense that you have your entitlement management process, like access packages requested, and that process will continue, like, you know, with them being able to have requested or the access package while the Logic app kicks off. So as soon as Logic app kicks off, it kind of kicks off, and that's it. Fire and forget, ELM keeps going. What we're working on is giving the option to the user to have what we call a blocking call, meaning that when you get to that stage where you kick off the Logic app, you block the entitlement management process from continuing till that Logic app workflow is completed. So it completes, it sends back some sort of success payload message, then entitlement management can continue, right? So that's helpful for a lot of customers who might say, oh, I want to like do this action provision in Salesforce or send this email or get this like backend process set up before I actually grant the access package. So that's the blocking that we're working on this quarter.
Very cool.
Salesforce. I saw Salesforce there.
Yep. So it popped in the My Apps panel, right?
Very nice.
So when I assigned it, the user doesn't have to go remember a bookmark, remember a link to where I want to go, because we can assign them using Azure AD, and how I've configured it, I will add that to their My Apps panel. So you can see I have many different applications that now enable from here. So here's a simple SAML checking app. So I can look at the claims. But depending on what it is, this helps the end user. They have self-service from the portal to request access. And when it's assigned, it shows up on their My Apps. This helps them. This helps the organization because now we have governance from the beginning, the life cycle, and eventually this will be access reviewed and removed when it's no longer appropriate.
There will be more links on the YouTube video. So if you are watching this on YouTube later on and you're watching the recorded session, we'll add all the links below, and make sure to subscribe and like so we can
Smash
continue.
that subscribe button, right?
Smash the subscribe button.
I
Make
just
sure
wanted to call
go on.
one thing out. Managed identities is something that we like customers and developers to use, and Logic Apps utilizes them. So connectors can use system assigned or user assigned managed identities. So you don't have to have code or credentials hard-coded in connectors. So we can modernize how we manage automation by using these constructs built into Azure and Azure AD. So I highly recommend always using managed identities, service principals for automation, and users if the connector only supports that. So I wanted to call that out.
If you can go with a mass identity, that's what you should do. If you can't go with a mass
Exactly.
identity, then strongly managed service principal workload identities are coming. We're going to be covering that very, very soon. That brings
Awesome.
all the identity governance goodness to service principals. It's in public preview right now. So expect a lot more content to come out around that because service principals are a bane in IT pro and developers' lives.
Yep.
Secrets and certificates expire. They're
Yep.
shared around and they're dangerous.
Then your app dies.
There you go. It was awesome, Jeff and Curren. Thank you both for showing up today. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye.